Well, Jamie, let's get into that to start with. It's John Molinaro of TFCRepublic.ca. I'm Sharms here. I just lightheartedly referred to it as TFC's funeral yesterday. Usually, the post-season press conference after a failed season, I refer to as funerals. Bit of a stretch, perhaps. But then it's interesting hearing Keith Pelly and John Herman, Jason Anders, John Osorio. It does kind of hammer down the point that yes, it was a poor season, right? This is the second highest payroll in MLS, yada yada yada. But if you compare it to the previous season, which was one of the worst in club history, a dreadful campaign across the board, you look at a season where the club came within 3 or so points of the playoffs, lost in the CAN Championship final, but played actually really well. Perhaps it's not quite as horrible as we're making out. At the same time, they are the second highest paid payroll team in the league, and they should be at least making the playoffs. Where would you rate this past season?
Look, it's a failed season. I don't know how anyone can really put that much of a positive spin on it. Yes, I think they won 3 times as many games as they did last year. They nearly doubled their point total. They reached the semifinal. Sorry, they reached the finals of CAN Champ. Reached the round of 16 of the League's Cup, which was an improvement over last year. But that's not saying all that much, just considering how bad, spectacularly low the bar was set last year. And at the end, I mean, whatever progress that was made, and it was minimal and inconsequential because they didn't make the playoffs. So, where does this rank? I mean, it's not, I wouldn't rank this necessarily in the bottom 5 seasons of all time in terms of TFC history, but it's not top 5 either. It's somewhere probably in the middle, probably, it's probably like a mid-table team where we're talking about a Premier League campaign.
For TFC, but we're comparing it to some really dreadful TFC seasons, right? That's the bar is so low, like you mentioned there.
Exactly.
It's almost, we shouldn't even consider last season, really. That should be like these aliens descended upon the TFC season and did something and then disappeared. And we try and forget about what happened last year because it was so bad.
Right.
So if you remove last season from the equation, it's a shit season. Simple as that, right? They didn't make the playoffs. Yeah. Now the press conference yesterday, there's always a lot of managerial speak, mumbo jumbo thrown in when you hear these things, right? And not a lot is really said, I don't think. Did you get anything that interesting yesterday?
I think for me the biggest takeaway is, and that, and I don't know whether you view this as good as bad, but it's clear that they clearly know that this team is lacking an identity, and it was something that I asked about repeatedly.
A few times you did, yeah.
A few times. But I think that's important because I think I put it directly to Keith Pelly when he was speaking. What is this sort of team's identity? And he shot it back at me. Well, what do you think? And I was like, well, I said quite candidly, I don't know what this team's identity is. And he said, well, then there you go. That's the problem. If you don't know, and I don't know, and the fans don't know, then that's clearly a problem. So I think the fact that they've clearly identified that they don't have sort of a clear and definable identity is something to be positive about, in that, at least they recognize the problem. And it seems like by bringing in Marco Nepe from Bayern Munich, and just from the discussions that they've had amongst themselves, that's something that they have to address going forward. And it was something that everyone, whether it was John Herdman, Jonathan Osorio, Jason Hernandez, and Keith Pelly, all touched upon, was the importance of getting sort of, a clear and identifiable identity. So I think that's a positive. But on the other hand, Sharms, I mean, I flipped that around, and it's like, well, why are we talking about this? Like, how is it that the club has gotten so far that after bringing in a coach like John Herdman, who has a distinct playing style and sort of managerial style and whatnot, that we're still talking about a lack of identity? I mean, I really baffles my mind that, we've gotten to this point, where, the team is still searching for an identity. And I think it's clearly missed one ever since, Greg Vanney sort of parted company with the company in 2020. It's gone off the rails since then, and I don't think you can kind of clearly point at TFC and say, yes, this is who they are as a team. Unlike, when you look at the New York Red Bulls or Philadelphia Union or LAFC or the Galaxy for that matter, they all have styles of play, a clear club identity. That's been missing from TFC for the last 4 seasons, and I'm stunned that it's been able to sort of get to this point after so long.
But that's where I get confused too, JMO, right? We look at what they did last offseason. They bring in John Herdman, right, who is a culture shifter, right? That's what he does. That's what was sold. He creates culture and identity. And midway through the season, they bring in a German with a great CV to create identity and culture. Wasn't that the manager's job? Last time they did that was Jurgen Klinsmann, remember? I'm going to recreate the club philosophy. We haven't got a philosophy. I'm going to create... Oh, Jesus. I'm not saying Marco Nepe is going to be Jurgen Klinsmann part 2. I'm not saying that. But we've been down that road before. And they kept pressing upon at the press conference, Keith Pelly, Hernandez, how the manager, generally speaking, that's the identity, the culture of the club. That's what it... Greg Vandy was the identity of TFC during those years. They kept pressing that. And then on the other hand, they're saying, but we're bringing in this highly regarded German executive, Marco Nepe, to create an identity, or at least explain to us why we haven't got an identity. There's a bit of a conflict there, I thought.
Yeah, I think so too. And I mean, look, I think John was somewhat hamstrung this year in the sense that, they brought him in to sort of change the culture and bring in a clear tactical identity and just overall identity to this team. But I think his hands were somewhat tied because of just the salary cap situation. You need the way John wants to play, and for any coach that matter, any boy that they want to play, you need certain players who can kind of fit that style. And they weren't necessarily able to bring in sort of the pieces that they needed just because of the salary cap situation. There wasn't much roster flexibility on this team this year. They're carrying a lot of bad contracts out of underperforming players, guys who are still under contract. The salary cap situation was made worse by the fact that they were paying for guys who are no longer on the team anymore. So I don't necessarily think that John was equipped with sort of like the right pieces, the talent that he needed to sort of, fully impose his sort of identity on this team. That has to change. Now, as Jason Hernandez said yesterday, they're going to be in a much better salary cap position going into the 2025 season. I think he said nearly double amount the cap space available. So they're going to be operating from a much stronger position of strength going forward. A lot of those sort of guys that they were paying for who are no longer with the club, those inefficiencies are now gone. They have a chance to get rid of some of these bad contracts. There's about 13. Well, no, there are 13 guys who are in the option years of their contract this offseason. So they have to make some decisions there. And that, I think there's some dead weight there that can be sort of shifted off. So I think that's going to help. So I think, they're really on the clock now. I think John and Jason Hernandez are firmly on the clock now. You can sort of look at this year and not necessarily write it off and just sort of totally excuse it. But I do think there were extenuating circumstances as to why things played out on the pitch the way they did. I don't think they have those excuses anymore. As I said, they're firmly on the clock going into 2025. So let's see what they can do.
I agree with that. I mean, not to give anyone a pass in this team, this club, the last year. But like you said, it was hard to rebuild the way they wanted to. That said, they brought in how many players in the last offseason? 7, 8 players?
Something like that.
Yeah. I mean, they brought in players, but
they did.
Was it the fact that they weren't the quality they needed to because of the cap situation?
I think that's part of that. I think it's more in the lines of, they had, guys like just some really poor contracts that they cannot move. And, too much of the salary cap was eaten up by players who were still not there that they were paying for. That, under other circumstances, they might have been able to bring in more pieces or bring in, maybe better players than they were able to bring in. So all these things are to be considered. And that's not to excuse them. Again, it's not to sort of just say, oh, okay, well, they had their hands tied and that this season is a write-off. You still have to sort of go out there and try to be competitive and work with what you have. But I do think it is one sort of extenuating circumstance that you have to look at and not give them a complete pass, but you have to take it into consideration.
Yeah, Keith Pelly was adamant though by 2026, obviously a massive year, maybe the biggest year ever for Canadian soccer. You have to have this thing sorted out. And in MLS, you can change things pretty quickly, which is interesting. I was talking to Josh Cloak and we were joking. Quite a few Doug Ford references from Keith Pelly, which I'm not sure necessarily Doug Ford references.
Oh, Doug Ford. Yeah. Yeah, that was weird.
I know. I was like, yeah, we know. Yeah, you played soccer with him. Okay. And do you know he's not the most popular of guys right now?
Yeah. It seemed like a weird choice of bringing that up, but whatever.
Great player once upon a time. We should get him on the podcast, Doug Ford.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah. I want to find out what kind of center forward he was, because this team is a center forward right now.
Oh, yeah.
Jay, do you have a list there of the players who are in their option years?
I do, yeah. So
let's go through one by one. I want to find out whether you would extend them or not.
Okay. So as we should explain this, there are 13 players who are not necessarily out of contract. They're entering the option years of their contract. So that means TFC has the option whether to bring them back at the same contract that they have or let them go. So it's essentially the club has the power all here. The club, it's not player options. The club has the option whether these players are going to be back in 2025 or not. Okay. So the 13 players, and I can give you their salaries too if you like as well.
Yeah, one at a time. Then we'll just quickly.
Okay. So let's start. I'll do this alphabetically and not by sort of a salary range. So Alonso Coelho is making 94,000, and all these dollars are US, by the way. So Alonso Coelho is making $94,049 US this year. I think you bring him back. I think he is a quality player, a young player who can, I think he grew by leaps and bounds this term. Not the finished article. I still think there's some development there, but I think he's a good, solid piece that you can sort of bring forward.
And at 94 grand is nothing, right?
So Kobe Franklin, the young fullback, was making $100,518. I think he was probably TFC's most consistent player last year. I think he fell down the depth chart this year because they essentially went to a back three, and plus Richie Larea came back. And so that meant, he had less playing time and opportunities. I still think he's at a number where you bring him back. He's a young player, and I think he could be like a serviceable piece going forward.
He's homegrown too, right?
Homegrown too. So
that does count, I think.
Yeah.
I
think it's important. I think it's important to sort of, continue to bring guys up who went through the academy and TFC2 into the first team, because you need to have that sort of pathway, just in terms of like attracting other young sort of talent to come to your academy and say, look, they can point to someone like Kobe Franklin as someone who is a first team player. Kevin Long, this contract amazes me. Kevin Long, who I think was probably TFC's best center back this year, was only making $277,500. I think that's a steal. I really think that's a steal. Now, I appreciate not the quickest player, and he's going to be, I think, 34, 35 next year. I still think you bring him back. So long as it's at that number, then I think that's a good investment to bring back. Shane O'Neill, this is an interesting one. Also a fellow center back, $413,000. I like Shane. I'm not sure I like that number, though.
He dropped off a lot.
He did drop off a lot.
He started the season so well, got the injury. And I don't think he returned to that form again.
No. And I think he's at that age where I think you got to get a little bit more younger and athletic at that spot in the center of defense. So I'm not sure that I would bring Shane O'Neill back. Prince Owusu, a TAM player at $807,500. Very streaky scorer. I mean, there was a run early in the season where he was kind of lights out, and then basically it was just long streaks of not scoring and scoring droughts. This is the club's top scorer this season in all competitions, but there's just no consistency there. I think you can do better. I think you can do much better. So
I agree. That's my point with him too, is that, he played okay. They need a number 9. That's got to be top of the list this offseason. And you can do better. As simple as that. And that's a big cap hit. If he's going to come back at less as a depth player, okay.
Sure.
I'm okay with that, but not at that cap hit. So, he has to walk.
Greg Ranjinsing, who is the third string goalkeeper, didn't play a single minute, is making $94,202. You could probably call up Ada Di Rosario from TFC2 to serve as the third string goalkeeper. at a roughly the same sort of amount, or maybe even less. So I would think that they were going to cut loose with Greg Ranjitsingh. This is an interesting one. Brandon Cervania,
Keep him. Go. Oh, 600?
$602,708.
Ooh.
Suffered the ACL injury last,
Yeah.
was it September? Only returned this September and October. So it was 12 months. That is, he was essentially out of commission. Serviceable player, but I think just considering his injuries, the fact that he was away for so long, and really you're not getting any sort of real offensive production out of him. I don't think you can bring him back at that number. I just think that's too high of a cost to pay.
What a shame, though,
Yeah,
because when they signed him last year, I was quite excited about that
me
one.
too.
And he played really well. But again, an injury just stymies the progression, and it's just about the cap hit, not the player.
Yeah,
At this point, you can do better, and this team has to do better, right? So you reallocate those funds somewhere else. 100%.
Yeah. It should be said too, like TFC could they do have the option of like renegotiating these deals. So there's the possibility that they can bring anyone on this list at a lower sort of contract. So if they can do that with Cervania and Owusu, then God bless. But I wouldn't sort of necessarily bring them back on their current deals. Luca Gavrin, the second string goalkeeper, this is a bit of a steal too. Only $74,868.
Great story too.
Yeah, great story. And I think he's someone. I mean, I think you absolutely bring him back, and I think he is someone who could, once Sean Johnson retires or moves on, he could be like the next starting goalkeeper. So I think
played
that's
really well when he came in, when he filled in for
very
Sharman.
well, very well.
Yeah,
and I don't think the team. I think the team has great confidence, showed great confidence when he came in. So I think you bring him back. DeAndre Kerr, $105,319. Another homegrown. I mean, I don't think that's an outrageous cap hit. Yes, he was an off year for him compared to last year, but I don't think that sort of cap hit is that cost prohibitive that you have to sort of dump his contract. I still think there is something there that you can, get more out of him.
J-Mo, the Franklins, the Kerrs, Cozy Thompson, we'll get to soon, I'm sure, as well. I just feel bad for them. These are young players breaking through in first team football amidst one of the terrible eras of Toronto FC. That's tough for a young player. He's shown enough, and he's not making that much money. So again, homegrown. I think you keep him around.
I do too. Ame Mbika, $133,125. Wasn't first choice center back. I think he's proven to be a liability at times. Even as like a fourth or fifth center back. It's not that outrageous of a number, but I just think you can do better. You can spend the money more efficiently. So he wouldn't be on my list of players to keep. Tyrese Spicer, the MLS rookie that they signed, $73,901. I think he had, like when he played, he was very bright. I think he offered a lot. So, and I think at that price, especially, it makes sense.
Well, I think he probably gets a raise. I mean, I think he's got a lot of potential, and he's your draft pick. You wonder about the injury history.
Right, you do. You do.
Right?
There is that, but I mean, I think at that cost, I mean, it's pretty assured that he's going to be back. Cozy Thompson, $100,260. I'm on the fence about this one because on the one hand, I think when he sort of made his debut, wherever it was 2 seasons ago, there were great expectations from him, and then he's just kind of fallen off. And this year was weird. I thought he was poor start to the season, and then around the summer he was really solid, and at times he even kept Debbie Flores out of like the starting 11. So I think you keep him. I think again, a homegrown guy, someone who came up through the youth academy and TFC2, and it's not that outrageous of a deal. So I think there's something that you could potentially get more out of them. I think
I'm just terrified of this team losing more homegrown players and then going somewhere else and making a career for themselves. We see it so often, and it's too young to cut these guys loose. I think I do have concerns about the shorts with Cozy. Yes. I need an answer. I just need an answer. I lose sleep at night. Why? He has great legs. Don't get me wrong. I've discussed this before on the podcast, JMO, but I need an answer.
Okay. So Charms, remind me, and then next season I'll try and get an answer for you.
Okay, please do. If someone's watching this or listening and knows an answer, please drop it in the comments.
And then the final name on the list is Luke Singh, who is making $147,966. This is a player who has sent out on loan for was it 2 or 3 consecutive seasons? I think he's only made like about a handful of appearances. I think there's no question that they have to let him go. I mean, it's just a drag on the salary cap. So I don't see him having any kind of future at TFC. I think he's a CPL player, and that's not a bad thing. I don't mean that in a bad way. I just think that's the level that he's at. He's not an MLS level player.
Yeah, I agree. And listen, we're not blaming these players for the reason
Oh,
that TFC failed this year. There's many other reasons why.
absolutely.
And these guys, mainly younger players, have some tough injury-riddled campaigns as well. So I think that was a good synopsis of what needs to be done with those players. Let's be honest, though, JMO, the big elephant in the room, or little small elephant, is Lorenzo Insigne.
Right.
And I asked about it. He was asked, numerous people asked numerous questions about Insigne. And I found it interesting when I think it was Keith Pelly, may have been Jason Hernandez, said that the project is changing, and some players join for a different project, alluding to, and that was actually an answer within a question about Lorenzo. Now you've written about it a lot, about the permutations of buyouts and what's possible, what's not possible. If there's any way of getting this done, does he leave? Do you really believe they're going to actively seek a way to get him out of the club?
I think it's certainly something they are going to consider. Look, I think he's a depreciating asset. He's 34. I think he's going to be 34 next year. He's been riddled with injuries, problems since he's come here. He hasn't produced. I think if you can somehow move him on, then I think it's probably best to sort of end this. But as I kind of wrote about this for TFC Republic earlier this season, that's easier said than done. I mean, there's certainly options where you can certainly move him on, but it's not that easy. I mean, buying him out, and I'm going to sort of repeat this. He's making 15 million and change. He's under contract until June of 2026. So this guy essentially has another year and a half left on his deal.
His option, right? I think to extend that deal too.
I believe so.
Yeah.
So which would be until the end of the year. But just as it stands, another year and a half. So if you were going to buy him out now, you're going to pay 23.1 million 23.1 million just to pay him out. I can't see in any world MLSE sort of paying that amount of money just to axe a player and get rid of him. And the argument has been made, well, you're already paying him and it's sort of dead money anyway. But no, that's not how sort of the business world operates. You're in for a penny now and you're in for a pound. I think, you have to try and get something out of him if you're going to spend that money. You can't sort of just flush that money down the toilet and say, okay, well, we've got rid of him now. No, I mean, I just think it's be an criminal waste of money. And again, I don't see how MLSE signs off on that.
I don't know where MLSE have TFC in their list of importance. I don't think it's that high. Not to say they haven't spent money; they have spent money. I'm not saying they're bad owners at all. But okay, I can see MLSE for a Maple Leaf or a Raptor throwing that kind of money around just as a way of writing it off. I don't see them doing it for TFC. Even though Keith Pelly says, listen, like I mentioned before, 2026 is so important. We have to get this thing sorted out by then because the eyeballs of the world are on this city, on this country during that tournament. And TFC will be part of that.
Sure.
And vis-a-vis so well the ownership group as well. So you want to get it sorted out. But yeah, it's a real tough one. I mean, does he even want to be here? Listen, if he's so rich and he doesn't really care about money, I've seen the Rolls Royce in the parking lot. It's there this week. It's beautiful. He's not short on dollars.
Right.
Maybe he just isn't happy and he'll make it easy for the club. But I just don't see that.
And that very well could be. I mean, I think, there, as I said, there are other options. I mean, I don't think trading him is an option because, who's going to pick up that contract? You could always leave him unprotected for the expansion draft and hope San Diego takes him, but I don't see San Diego shelling that money out. So, I mean, what are you left with? You're left with, a transfer of some sort. But again, he's a depreciating asset. And I mean, I don't know that another club is going to be that eager to take on a player who's just had all these injury problems and hasn't been able to produce. Maybe some will. I mean, I shouldn't sort of write that possibility off, but it's not like he's going to go to Real Madrid or even back to Napoli. I don't think that's an option. He's going to have to go to sort of like a mid-level table team and might not even be back in Italy. So there's that to consider. The other option is just to come to sort of a mutual agreement to terminate his contract between him and TFC, and they'll just say, look, things aren't working out. Let's just agree to sort of end things now. Now that's possible, but TFC would still have to pay out some portion of his remaining contract, and the key part of that is that it would still carry the full salary cap hit until his contract run out. It would open up a DP spot, but there's even a whole, and I don't want to go down this rabbit hole unless you want to, but there's the whole question of whether they're going to continue with the 3 DP model next year or whether they're going to go to the 4 under 22 model. So
well, Jason spoke about that, and he said essentially, that's the three model's great if you're close to a championship.
Yeah, and I think it's John Herdman said something really interesting yesterday when talked about. He said, essentially, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said this team needs to get younger, it needs to get more athletic, it needs to get more durable. That leads me to believe that they have to consider going like with the 4 U22 model and 2 DPs rather than 3 DP models. And I think he's absolutely bang on. I think this team does need to get a bit younger. It certainly needs to get more athletic, and it absolutely has to get more durable.
Well, he says that, and then you hear both Jason Hernandez and Keith Pelly both say we are going to meet with the Lorenzo Insigne's people and have a good conversation this offseason. That to me tells me that they're going to do all they can to get rid of this guy.
I think so. I think they're going to sort of explore options and look to sort of move on from him. But at the end of the day, it might not be possible. So I think they have to be prepared to the fact that this isn't going to end in a divorce right away. That they're going to have to sort of see out this marriage for a little bit longer.
Yeah, it's going to be some off season. He was asked about Keith Pelly was asked about the president role, the structure of this club moving forward since Bill Manning left during the season. What are your thoughts on that?
It's funny you mentioned this, Sharman, because I remember after Keith Pelly sort of spoke, like after he was done speaking and left the room, I turned to sort of Neil Davidson, the Canadian press, because I was the one who asked about the president role. I said, quite, pretty directly, where do things stand with the president search? Is there a timeline in terms of hiring a new president? When Pelly was done speaking and he left the room, I turned to Neil Davidson and I said, I have no idea what he said about, when he was trying to answer my question.
I'm so glad you just said that, because neither did I.
Yeah.
And I remember leaving that press conference saying, I know Jamer asked about it, but I'm none the wiser.
No, I
thought I missed something or I was just dumb. So I'm glad you said that.
No, I mean, the quote, I mean, like there was a large sort of like jumble of word salad that he threw at me. But basically, I mean, this is part of the quote is the entire organizational structure and the infrastructure that we're going to build is something that we're going to evaluate. I take that. Yeah. I mean, I can't be sure. I take that to mean that there might not be a club president coming back, that there might.
They're going to use the words. He used the word silo in there as well somewhere, I think. Somewhere. Whenever I hear a manager, and this from the TV world, use the word silo, I vomit a little bit in my mouth.
Right.
It's such management bullshit spiel. It really is. We're working under silos. We're using shut up. Just give me an answer.
Yeah, I mean, look, I thought I was pretty direct in my question. I just wanted to know where things stand in terms of hiring a new club president. And I specifically asked, I used this word. I said, is there any kind of timeline in terms of when a club president, could be coming in? And I got something like, not an answer to that question. So, I mean, I don't know where things stand. I mean, we'll see.
But in fairness to him, he has really just arrived on the job. Sure. He is still looking at the whole MLSE structure as a whole. And I know the Leafs have the same thing coming up with Brendan Shanahan out of contract after this season. And it's going to be kind of company-wide. This is how we structure our sports teams. Whether that is a club president or a general manager or director of sports, whatever, reporting to Keith Pelly, or is it somewhere in between there? Jimmy Brennan made a great point actually recently, saying how sports teams often throw a president in there just to kind of give a buffer between the ownership and the sports teams. It takes the pressure off ownership because you can deflect all the flack to the president.
Right.
Which is why it's kind of appealing. But whether that's going to be MLSE's modus operandi, I don't know. But,
that's a good point that Jimmy raised. I mean, I never really kind of thought about it in those terms, but I think he's quite right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, It's going to be a fascinating off-season. A
To
lot's going to
say the
happen.
least.
Yeah. I think many I mentioned the Leafs before, but maybe Lorenzo Insigne is the Mitch Marner of TFC, a player that everyone wanted out.
Mhm.
Must get him out. And then actually,
But-
Mitch Marner so far has had a great start to this season. Maybe they re-sign him after all.
Right. I mean,
I
I'll
can't see
say
that.
one last thing about this, Sharms, about this whole Lorenzo thing. I mean, he underperformed. He did not live up to his contract. I think there are some legitimate questions about, whether he wants to be here and his lack of sort of desire in terms of getting through
No,
injuries.
heart and soul, according to Keith Pelly. Heart and soul.
Okay. So, but I think, I don't think, us and fans and media members questioning all that. I don't think we're out of bounds with that. I think there are questions to be asked. At the same time, it does seem to me that he is being sort of pointed at as the sole reason or the major reason why
scapegoat.
this club is in the state that he has been it seemed like he is as a convenient excuse as as to why this club is in the shape that it was this year. He's not. There are so many issues that are sort of hounding this team. He's one of them, but he's not the end all and be all. Should they move on from Lorenzo, then God bless. But there are other issues here that to be addressed that I would argue that are much more important than Lorenzo Insigne. So I don't think people should sort of lose sight of the fact that it's not, he's not the clothespin upon which all of TFC's woe should be hung on. There's other issues as well.
I thought Ozo spoke really, really well.
Me too.
That's a different Ozo, isn't it?
Very much so. I think
he was full of confidence and opinion.
Mhm.
And when he said he feels really good about Keith Pelly's leadership, he said, in the past, the last few years, I felt that winning wasn't a priority. That was startling. It's a big statement.
Right.
And I'm surprised it wasn't, addressed more in the media. So for your captain to say in the past, basically, we didn't care about winning this club.
Right.
But that's changing now.
No, I was quite impressed with John and just the way he sort of handled himself. And, I think he's even said because I asked about, what this year was like for him as captain. He said, he kind of had to grow into the role and that he feels really comfortable in now. But you could see, he was speaking with the authority of a captain yesterday, really sort of taking everything on charge.
Did. So he sounded like a captain for sure.
Yeah, very much so. You could kind of see a little bit of Michael Bradley in him yesterday with the way he was handling himself. So
he was a little bit shorter-winded, but didn't go quite as long as Michael would. But
yeah,
Michael's always a brilliant quote though. But you had to find the quote within the 7-minute answer.
Correct.
But hey, I'd rather have that than nothing. Let's be honest. JMO, TFCRepublic.ca. It's your off season. There's never an off season.
No.
At TFCRepublic.ca. Right now, you can sign up for free for a trial run, right?
So for any time throughout the season, throughout the year, all you have to do is sign up, and it's like you get a 1-week trial, and that sort of gets you behind the paywall, so you get to see all of the content. And it essentially just gives you like a way to give the site a test run and just see what we're all about. And then at the end of the week, the trial ends, and you can continue to subscribe if you want, which is $8 a month or $50 a year, which I think is pretty reasonable.
Jamie, charge more, will you?
No, I think we got a good price point.
Are you happy with that? Are you?
Yeah, I'm happy. The site is doing well, so I can't complain about business.
I don't want to know if you were $75 a year though. Just $15 more. Think about how it changes your life.
Nah, you know what? I don't want to gouge people. I think we've got like a good thing going here, so I'm happy with the price point. But no, the trial does give everyone, as I said yesterday when I was tweeting out sort of the locker cleanout day report, which was like a big 3,000 word opus I wrote. I said, look, if you've ever been on the fence about just giving us a try, because the locker cleanouts was free to read for everyone. It wasn't behind the paywall. It was like, if you've ever been on the fence to subscribe or see what we're all about, this will give you an idea of the content that we produce. So yeah, it's sign up for like a week. If you want to continue after the trial, then great. If not, then that's fine too. But it's just a chance for everyone to see what we're all about.
Listen, bad teams, struggling teams, rebuilding teams are more fun to cover in the off season.
In a lot of ways. Oh yeah, absolutely. Right? Sure, no doubt.
Yeah. So TFC fans, be thankful that you got a terrible team there.
Yeah, we're gonna I know the season is over, but pretty much from now until December 20th, I'm gonna be on the beat. So just daily reporting, daily content, sometimes 2 or 3 pieces of content every day. We're gonna look at the off season, from every possible angle. So and I'm only going to, and I'm going right up until the MLS Super Draft, which is on December 20th. And after that, I'm taking a brief vacation. But it's pretty much, full blown coverage of TFC for the next 2 months.
All right, well, get on there, everyone. TFCRepublic.ca. If you're a TFC fan or not, just a fan of Canadian soccer, it really is well worth the money. And I'm cheap. Yeah, I pay for it. All right, everyone. JMO, thanks, mate.
No problem.
Enjoyed this. And let's sit back and get some popcorn and enjoy the show. This has been Footy Prime. We'll see you again on Monday. Cheers for watching and listening.